You feel it, don't you? That quiet pressure sitting on your chest the moment you open your eyes. Not heavy enough to crush you, not sharp enough to scare you, just constant, just there. Like a slow leak draining something you can't quite name. And you try to ignore it. You reach for your phone. You tell yourself it's just another morning, just another day. But beneath that routine there's a whisper you keep pushing down. A whisper that says, this isn't it. This isn't what you're meant to be doing. This isn't leading anywhere. And the worst part is not that you hear it. The worst part is that you've learned how to silence it, how to drown it in noise, in distraction, in endless scrolling, in empty habits that feel productive but produce nothing. And you've gotten good at it, too good. Because now the days blur together, one dissolving into the next, and you can't even pinpoint when it started. When you went from someone with urgency, with fire, with direction, to someone who just drifts. And that word should bother you. It should sting. But it doesn't hit as hard as it used to, because drifting is comfortable. Drifting doesn't demand anything from you. Drifting doesn't force you to confront the gap between who you are and who you could be. And that gap, that space, that silent distance, is where the real tension lives. But you avoid it. You avoid it every single day by choosing ease over effort, by choosing distraction over discipline, by choosing comfort over growth. And you justify it. You always have a reason. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself you'll start later. You tell yourself you just need the right moment, the right mindset, the right spark. But deep down, you know that moment isn't coming, because it was never about the moment. It was about the decision, and you keep postponing it, pushing it further away, convincing yourself you're still on the path, when in reality, you've stepped off it a long time ago. And now you're just walking in circles, repeating patterns that feel familiar but lead nowhere. And familiarity has become your prison. Because it feels safe, it feels predictable, it doesn't challenge you, and that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because you don't notice the damage while it's happening. You don't notice the slow erosion of your standards, the quiet lowering of your expectations, the subtle shift from ambition to acceptance, from hunger to hesitation, from action to avoidance. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small choices, tiny decisions that seem insignificant in the moment. Skipping one task, delaying one commitment, choosing one distraction, telling one small lie to yourself, and then another, and another, until those small moments stack into a pattern. And that pattern becomes your identity. And now you're not just someone who avoids hard things. You are someone who lives in avoidance. And that's the line you crossed without even realizing it. And now you sit there wondering why nothing changes, why nothing moves, why everything feels stagnant. But the answer is right in front of you. It's in your habits, in your routines, in your unwillingness to step into discomfort. And I'm not saying this to attack you. I'm saying this because I've been there. I've lived in that same loop, waking up with intention and ending the day with excuses, telling myself I was making progress when I was really just maintaining the illusion of it. And that illusion is seductive. It makes you feel like you're doing something when you're doing nothing. It gives you just enough satisfaction to keep you from changing. And that's the trap. That's the silent collapse. Not a dramatic fall, not a catastrophic failure, but a gradual fade into mediocrity, into numbness, into a life that looks fine on the surface, but feels empty underneath. And you learn to tolerate it. You learn to live with that quiet dissatisfaction, that low-level frustration that never quite goes away. And you tell yourself it's normal. You tell yourself everyone feels this way. You normalize the very thing that's holding you back. And once you accept it as normal, you stop questioning it, you stop resisting it, you stop fighting against it, and that's when it really takes hold. Because now you're not just stuck, you're comfortable being stuck. And comfort is the most dangerous place you can be when you're not where you want to be. Because it removes the urgency, it dulls the pain. It convinces you that there's no need to change right now, that you have time, that you can wait. But time doesn't wait. It moves whether you act or not. It passes whether you grow or not. And every day you spend in that state is a day you don't get back. A day you traded for temporary ease. A day you gave up for something that didn't move you forward. And those days accumulate. They stack up quietly in the background until one day you look up and realize months have passed, maybe years, and nothing is different. Nothing has changed. And that realization hits harder than any failure ever could. Because at least failure means you tried. At least failure means you moved. But this is something else. This is stagnation. This is standing still while convincing yourself you're in motion. And it eats at you, slowly, consistently, like a constant reminder that you're capable of more, but choosing less. And that choice, whether you admit it or not, is yours. It has always been yours. Because no one forced you into this pattern. No one made you choose comfort over growth. You did that, repeatedly, consistently, until it became automatic, until it became who you are right now. And that might be hard to hear. It might make you uncomfortable. It might trigger that instinct to defend yourself, to explain, to justify, to say it's not that simple. But it is that simple. Not easy, but simple, because the truth doesn't need complexity. The truth is clear. The truth is direct. The truth is sitting right in front of you every single day. And the truth is this: you are not where you want to be because you haven't done what's required to get there. And instead of facing that head on, instead of stepping into the discomfort of change, you've built a life around avoiding it. And now that avoidance has become your default, your baseline, your normal. And breaking out of it feels harder than staying in it, because staying in it is familiar, staying in it is predictable, staying in it doesn't force you to confront yourself. And that's what you've been avoiding this entire time. Not the work, not the effort, not the discipline, but the confrontation. The moment where you have to look at yourself without excuses, without filters, without distractions, and admit that you've been settling, that you've been playing smaller than you should, that you've been choosing the easier path, even when you knew it wasn't leading anywhere. And that moment, that realization, is uncomfortable. It's heavy. It's not something you can just brush off, but it's necessary, because without it, nothing changes. Without it, you stay exactly where you are, repeating the same patterns, living the same days, feeling the same quiet dissatisfaction, and telling yourself the same lies. And that's the cycle you're in right now, whether you want to admit it or not. And the longer you stay in it, the deeper it gets, the harder it becomes to break, because habits solidify, patterns reinforce themselves, and what once felt temporary becomes permanent, unless you decide otherwise, unless you interrupt it, unless you choose to stop drifting and start confronting. And that choice, that moment of decision, is the line between continuing this silent collapse and stepping into something different. But right now, in this moment, before anything changes, before any action is taken, you need to see it clearly. You need to feel it fully. You need to stop numbing it, stop avoiding it, stop pretending it's not there, because it is there. It has been there, and it will keep being there until you do something about it. And no one is coming to do it for you. No one is going to step in and force you out of this. No one is going to hand you clarity or discipline or direction. That responsibility is yours. It has always been yours. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you stop waiting and start acting. But until then, until you face this truth without running from it, without softening it, without negotiating with it, you will stay exactly where you are, in this quiet, slow, almost invisible collapse that doesn't look like failure from the outside, but feels like it on the inside, every single day. You're sitting there in a very real place, not some abstract battlefield, not some dramatic turning point, just your room, maybe a dim light, maybe the hum of a fan, maybe the glow of a screen lighting up your face, while hours slip past without resistance. And if someone walked in right now, they wouldn't see a crisis, they'd see a normal life. A person relaxing, unwinding, taking a break. And that's exactly how this trap survives. It disguises itself as normal, as harmless, as deserved. But inside your head there's friction, a quiet tension between what you're doing and what you know you should be doing. And instead of confronting it, you negotiate with it. You say, just a few more minutes. You say, I'll start after this. You say, today doesn't matter that much. And that negotiation has become your routine, your default response to discomfort. Because the moment something feels hard, your mind immediately searches for an exit, a softer option, a delay, and you take it, almost automatically, without even realizing it anymore. And this is where the hard truth begins. Not in some grand failure, not in some catastrophic mistake, but in these small, repeated moments where you choose ease over effort. And the scary part is how invisible it feels, how reasonable it sounds in your own head. Because you're not telling yourself you're quitting. You're telling yourself you're adjusting, you're pacing, you're being realistic. But let's strip that down. Let's remove the comfortable language and look at it for what it is. You are avoiding the work, consistently, deliberately, and you've built a system around that avoidance. A system that protects you from discomfort while quietly sabotaging your future. And it shows up everywhere, in the way you start things but don't finish them, in the way you plan but don't execute, in the way you consume information but never apply it. You watch, you read, you listen. You feel inspired for a moment, maybe even energized, but then nothing changes. Because inspiration without action is just entertainment, and you've confused the two for far too long. You've convinced yourself that thinking about doing something is the same as doing it, that preparing is progress, that waiting for the right moment is strategy. But it's not. It's delay. It's hesitation. It's fear dressed up as logic. And if you're honest with yourself, really honest, you'll see that pattern clearly. You'll recognize how often you've told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow," and how rarely that tomorrow actually came with action. And this isn't about motivation. It's not about whether you feel like it or not. It's about the standard you've allowed yourself to live by. A standard where effort is optional, where discipline is negotiable, where comfort takes priority over growth. And that standard is the reason your current path leads nowhere. Because a path is defined by direction and movement. And right now, you have neither. You have motion without progress, activity without outcome. You're busy but not effective, engaged but not advancing. And that illusion is dangerous because it keeps you occupied enough to feel like you're doing something while keeping you stagnant enough to never actually move forward. And the world won't stop you. It won't interrupt you and say, "Hey, you're wasting your time." It will let you continue. It will let you stay exactly where you are for as long as you choose. Because that's the reality. No one is coming to correct your course. No one is going to enforce discipline on your behalf. And that's where most people fall apart. Not because they lack potential, but because they lack structure. They lack a system that forces them to act regardless of how they feel. And without that system, you become a slave to your impulses, to your moods, to your environment. And your environment right now is not demanding anything from you. It's too comfortable, too forgiving, too easy to stay the same. And when there's no pressure, there's no growth. When there's no resistance, there's no change. And you've been living in that low-resistance state for so long that anything challenging feels overwhelming. Anything difficult feels like too much. So you retreat, you delay, you tell yourself you'll come back to it later. But later never has the same urgency as now. Later is where ambition goes to die, quietly, without drama, without noise. Just a slow fading of intention into inaction. And if you look at your life honestly, you'll see the evidence everywhere. Goals you once cared about that are now just ideas. Plans you once made that were never followed through. Opportunities that passed not because you weren't capable, but because you weren't ready. And you weren't ready because you didn't prepare. You didn't push yourself. You didn't build the habits required to handle those moments when they came. And that's the part that's hard to accept, because it puts the responsibility back on you. It removes the excuses. It strips away the comfort of blaming circumstances and leaves you with a simple, undeniable truth. Your current results are a direct reflection of your current actions, and your current actions are not aligned with the future you claim to want. There's a gap, a clear mismatch between your expectations and your behavior. And as long as that gap exists, nothing changes, nothing improves, nothing moves forward. You can want more all day. You can visualize success. You can talk about your goals. But if your daily actions don't support that vision, then it's just noise. Empty noise that makes you feel temporarily better while keeping you permanently stuck. And this is where most people turn away. This is where they get uncomfortable and look for something softer, something more encouraging, something that tells them they're doing okay, that they just need time. But time is not the issue. Direction is. Discipline is. Consistency is. And without those, time only makes things worse, because it reinforces the patterns you're already living in. It deepens the habits you've already built. And right now, those habits are not leading you anywhere meaningful. They're leading you in circles, keeping you busy, keeping you occupied, but not moving you forward. And that's the brutal reality you need to face. Not tomorrow, not later, but now. in this moment. Because the longer you avoid it, the more comfortable you become with a life that doesn't challenge you, doesn't grow you, doesn't fulfill you. And once that comfort settles in, it becomes harder to break, harder to escape, because you've adapted to it, you've normalized it, you've accepted it as your baseline. And raising that baseline requires effort, requires discomfort, requires a level of honesty that most people are not willing to confront. But if you want something different, if you truly want to move forward, then you don't have the luxury of avoiding this truth anymore. You don't get to pretend that what you're doing is enough, because it's not, and you know it's not. That's why the tension is there. That's why the dissatisfaction never fully disappears. It lingers, it waits. It reminds you that there's more you could be doing, more you should be doing. And until your actions reflect that, until you align your behavior with your ambition, your path will remain exactly what it is right now. A loop, a cycle, a direction that feels like movement but leads to nothing. You think the problem is that you lack motivation, that you're missing discipline, that somehow you just haven't found your drive yet. But that's not the real problem, not even close. The truth is far more uncomfortable than that. Because what if I told you that you are already perfectly disciplined, just not in the way you want to admit? What if I told you that every single day you are executing a system with precision, consistency, and reliability? But that system is designed for one thing only, to keep you exactly where you are. And once you see that, really see it, you can't unsee it, because suddenly your life stops looking like chaos and starts looking like structure. A structure you built, reinforced, and followed without question. Think about it. You wake up at roughly the same time. You reach for the same distractions. You follow the same patterns of avoidance. You respond to discomfort in the exact same way, every single day. That's not random. That's not lack of discipline. That's a system running exactly as designed. The problem is not that you don't have control. The problem is that you've given control to the wrong patterns, and they are working flawlessly. They are protecting you from effort, from risk, from failure. But they're also protecting you from growth, from progress, from becoming anything more than what you are right now. And here's the twist that most people never confront. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And your current system is built for comfort, not expansion, for repetition, not evolution. So even when you feel that surge of motivation, even when you get that rare moment of clarity where you say, "This is it, I'm going to change," you don't actually change. You temporarily override the system. You push against it for a few hours, maybe a few days, but then it pulls you back. Because systems are stronger than emotions, patterns are stronger than intentions, and you never address the root. You never dismantled the structure that's keeping you stuck. You just tried to fight it with willpower. And willpower is fragile. It fades. It fluctuates. It disappears the moment things get uncomfortable. And your system knows that. Your system is built to outlast your motivation. That's why it wins every time. That's why you keep ending up in the same place, no matter how many times you promise yourself things will be different. Because nothing actually changed underneath. The environment stayed the same. The habits stayed the same. The triggers stayed the same. So the outcome stays the same. And this is where the reality shifts. Because now the question is no longer, why can't I stay motivated? The question becomes, what system am I running? And once you ask that, everything starts to look different. Your failures stop being mysterious. They become predictable. Your lack of progress stops being confusing. It becomes logical, because it's the direct result of a system that is doing exactly what it was built to do. And here's the part that hits hard. You built it, not intentionally, not consciously, but through repetition, through choices, through what you tolerated, through what you avoided. You trained yourself to live this way. You trained your mind to seek comfort, to escape difficulty, to delay action. And now it's automatic. Now it doesn't ask for permission. It just executes. And that's why change feels so hard. Not because you're weak, but because you're going against a system that is deeply ingrained. A system that has been reinforced hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And breaking that isn't about feeling ready. It's about creating a new structure that overrides the old one. And most people never do that. They stay at the surface. They try harder, to want it more. But they never change the framework. And without changing the framework, nothing changes long term. You might get short bursts of progress. You might have a good day, a productive week, But eventually the system reasserts itself. It pulls you back into the baseline you've set. And that baseline right now is low. It's built on minimal effort, minimal resistance, minimal growth. And until that baseline shifts, until the default behavior changes, your results will always regress to that level. And this is where the real awakening happens. Because now you're forced to confront something deeper than motivation, deeper than discipline. You're forced to confront identity, who you are on a daily basis, not who you want to be, not who you imagine yourself becoming, but who you consistently show up as. Because that version of you is the one your system supports. That's the one it reinforces. And if that version avoids discomfort, delays action, and settles for less, then that's exactly what your life will reflect. Consistently, predictably, without exception. And suddenly, it makes sense. Suddenly it's clear why things haven't changed, why you feel stuck, why you keep circling the same place. It's not a mystery, it's not bad luck, it's design, your design. And that realization can either break you or wake you up, because once you see it, you lose the ability to pretend. You can't go back to thinking you just need more motivation. You can't keep telling yourself you're trying your best when your system says otherwise. You're forced to take responsibility at a level that's uncomfortable, at a level that demands action, because now you know that every result in your life is a byproduct of the system you're running. And if you don't like the results, then the system has to change. Not tomorrow, not gradually over months of overthinking, but deliberately, intentionally. Because systems don't change on their own. They have to be rebuilt, step by step, habit by habit, environment by environment. And that's where most people hesitate, because rebuilding a system means stepping into discomfort consistently. It means removing the easy options. It means creating friction where there used to be ease. It means holding yourself to a higher standard even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. And that's the difference between staying stuck and breaking out. Not a sudden burst of motivation, not a perfect plan, but a structural shift, a new reality where your default actions align with your goals instead of contradicting them. And that's the twist you need to understand. You're not one breakthrough away from change. You're one system away from it. And until you accept that, until you stop chasing feelings and start building structure, you will continue to experience the same cycle, the same frustration, the same lack of progress, because nothing external is going to fix an internal system that's designed to keep you exactly where you are. And once you truly grasp that, once it clicks, it changes the way you see everything. Because now you're not asking, how do I feel today? You're asking, what does my system require? And that shift, that simple but brutal shift in perspective, is where real change begins. Not in inspiration, not in intention, but in design. And then there's a moment where everything goes quiet. No noise, no distraction, no excuses left to hide behind. Just you, sitting with the truth you've been running from. And it doesn't scream, it doesn't attack. It just sits there, heavy, undeniable, asking nothing but honesty. And for once, you don't reach for your phone. You don't look for a way out. You just stay there, and you feel it. The weight of wasted hours, wasted days, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that makes you panic, but in a slow, sinking realization that time has been passing, without you really living it. And that hits different, because you can lie to people, you can fake progress, you can act like everything is fine, but you can't lie to that feeling, that quiet awareness that something is off. Something has been off for a long time, and you've been avoiding it, not because you're weak, but because it's uncomfortable. Because it forces you to look at yourself without filters, without stories, without the version of you that sounds better in your head. And what's left is simple, almost painfully simple. You are not where you could be, and deep down, you know exactly why. No one needs to explain it to you. No one needs to point it out. You've seen the moments, the choices, the times you could have done more but didn't, the times you knew what needed to be done but chose something easier, and they replay. Not all at once, but in fragments, small flashes of memory that remind you this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one big mistake. It was a series of small decisions, repeated, reinforced, until they became your reality. And sitting there, in that silence, you realize something else, something even harder to accept. You had more control than you admitted, more responsibility than you wanted to carry. And that stings, because it removes the comfort of blaming anything else. It brings everything back to you. your actions, your habits, your choices. And for a moment, you might feel regret, not loud, not overwhelming, but steady, like a low hum in the background. A sense that you could have done better, that you still can, but that time doesn't rewind. It only moves forward. And that's where the weight shifts. Because now it's not just about the past, it's about what you do next. And the silence becomes a space, not just of reflection, but of decision. And decisions in moments like this don't need to be loud. They don't need to be dramatic. They just need to be real. And real decisions feel different. They're not based on emotion. They're not driven by a surge of motivation. They're grounded, steady, almost quiet, like a line being drawn internally. A line that says, this is where it changes. Not because you feel ready, not because everything is clear, but because you're done pretending, done negotiating, done living in that gray area between intention and action. And as that settles in, there's a shift, subtle but undeniable. The noise loses its grip. The distractions don't feel as appealing, not because they've changed, but because you have, even if just slightly, even if just enough to see them for what they are. Escapes, temporary relief that costs you something deeper. And for the first time in a while, you sit with that trade-off fully aware, fully present. And it's not as easy to justify anymore, not as easy to say, just this once, because you've seen where just this once leads. You've lived it, over and over. And the pattern is clear now, almost painfully clear. And clarity like that changes things. Not instantly, not magically, but fundamentally. Because once you see the truth without distortion, without denial, you can't unsee it. It stays with you. It follows you into your next choice, your next action, your next moment of hesitation. And that's where the real tension builds. Not between you and the world, but within you. Between the version that wants to stay the same and the version that knows it can't. And that tension is where growth begins. Not in comfort, not in certainty, but in that uncomfortable space where you're aware of both paths, the easy one and the hard one, the familiar and the unknown. And you feel the pull of both, strong, persistent, but now there's something new, something that wasn't there before, a quiet refusal to go back completely, a resistance to falling into the same patterns without question. And it's small, almost fragile, but it's real. And in that moment, that's enough. Because change doesn't start with perfection. It starts with awareness, with honesty, with a willingness to sit in the truth long enough for it to actually mean something. And right now, in this stillness, in this pause, you're closer to that than you've been in a long time. Not because you've done anything extraordinary, but because you've stopped running, just for a moment. You've stopped avoiding, and you've allowed yourself to feel the weight of where you are. And that weight, as uncomfortable as it is also grounding. It anchors you in reality, strips away illusion, and leaves you with something solid to stand on, something real to work from. And from that place, from that quiet clarity, something begins to form. Not a loud promise, not a dramatic declaration, just a simple understanding that continuing the way you've been is no longer an option you can pretend is okay. And that understanding sits with you, steady, patient, waiting for what you do next. So here is what all of this comes down to. Not theory, not motivation, not something that sounds good for a moment and fades the next day, but something real, something you can actually hold on to when the noise comes back and tries to pull you into the same patterns again. The lesson is simple, almost uncomfortable in how direct it is. Your life will not change until your daily standards change. Not your intentions, not your goals, not the version of yourself you imagine late at night, but the standards you execute when no one is watching, when it's quiet, when it's just you and a decision. Because that is where everything is decided. Not in big moments, not in rare bursts of energy, but in the ordinary, repeatable actions that shape your identity over time. And if those actions stay the same, your life stays the same. It doesn't matter how badly you want something. It doesn't matter how clear your vision is. If your behavior doesn't align with it, the outcome is already determined. And that's not meant to discourage you, it's meant to give you control. Because once you understand that, you stop waiting for something external to change. You stop hoping for the perfect moment, and you start focusing on what actually matters. What you do today, what you repeat tomorrow, what becomes your baseline next week. And that's where the shift happens. Not in one big decision, but in a series of smaller ones that you refuse to compromise on. You start choosing the harder option more often, not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently enough to break the old pattern. You start showing up even when it's inconvenient, even when it doesn't feel good, even when there's no immediate reward, because you understand something most people ignore. The reward is not in the moment, it's in the accumulation. It's in who you become after repeating that behavior enough times that it becomes automatic. And that's the real goal, not chasing motivation, not relying on discipline as something you have to force every day, but building a system where the right actions become your default, where doing what you said you would do is no longer a debate, it's just what you do. And that takes time, it takes repetition, it takes a level of honesty with yourself that doesn't allow excuses to survive. But it's possible, and more importantly, it's necessary if you want something different from what you have right now. Because staying where you are is also a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one, even if it feels passive, even if it feels like you're just going with the flow. You are still choosing it every day with every action you repeat. And that's the part most people don't want to face, because it means they can't blame anything else. They can't point to circumstances, to timing, to luck. They have to look at themselves and ask a harder question. Am I actually living in a way that supports the life I say I want? And if the answer is no, then the follow-up is even harder. What am I willing to change about my daily behavior to close that gap? Not someday, not when it's convenient, but starting now, in small, real, measurable ways. And this is where you separate yourself, not by being perfect, not by never slipping, but by refusing to let a slip turn into a pattern, by catching yourself faster, by correcting course sooner, by holding a line that you don't cross repeatedly. And that line becomes your standard, your new baseline, the thing that defines how you operate regardless of how you feel. And over time, that baseline rises, slowly, steadily, until the person you are today starts to feel unfamiliar, until the habits that once controlled you no longer have the same pull, not because they disappeared, but because you outgrew them, you replaced them, you built something stronger. And that's the real transformation, not a sudden change, but a gradual shift in identity, in standards, in what you tolerate and what you don't. And once that shift begins, it compounds, it builds momentum, it creates a sense of control that you haven't felt in a long time. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're finally aligned with your own expectations. And that alignment is powerful. It removes the internal conflict, the constant negotiation, the quiet guilt that comes from knowing you're not doing what you said you would do. And in its place, there's clarity, there's direction, there's a sense that you're moving, not drifting, not circling, but actually moving forward, step by step, and that's all it takes. Not a massive leap, not a complete overhaul overnight, just consistent, intentional steps in the right direction, repeated enough times to change who you are. And that brings you to a question that only you can answer. And it's not a question you should rush. It's one you should sit with, honestly, without trying to soften it, without trying to justify anything. Just look at your current path as it is, not as you wish it was, and ask yourself, if I continue like this for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, where does this actually lead? Not where do I hope it leads, but where does it realistically take me based on what I'm doing right now? And once you have that answer, the real question follows. Am I willing to accept that outcome? Am I willing to live with that version of my life? Or am I ready to change the way I operate on a daily basis to create something different? And there's no shortcut around that decision. No way to avoid it forever, because time will force an answer one way or another, either through your actions or through your inaction. And the difference between those two is everything. So take that question with you. Don't ignore it. Don't bury it under distraction. Let it stay in the back of your mind. Let it guide your next choice, your next moment of hesitation, because that's where it matters. And if something in this resonated with you, if you felt that tension, that clarity, that shift in perspective, then don't let it fade like everything else. Stay connected to it. Stay around ideas that challenge you, that push you, that don't let you fall back into comfort without awareness. And if you want a space where that kind of thinking is consistent, where you're reminded, not gently, but honestly, of what it takes to move forward, then consider staying with me, not as a passive listener, but as someone who's actively choosing to change, step by step, day by day. Because this isn't about watching content, it's about building something real in your own life. And if you're ready for that, then you already know what to do next.